I'm Nick Hughes, and this is Founders Live Conversations.
Anna Steffeney, welcome to Founders Live.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is so great. Man, it's just been so long since you pitched at Founders Live. That was 2015. LeaveLogic was your company, and really excited to talk about not only your experience building the company, but the eventual acquisition and where you're at now. But before we get there, really want to get to know you a little more. Where did you grow up? How did you get here? How did you go from a professional life into the entrepreneurial world? So, I know that's a lot, but, we'll start with where you grew up and, where'd you go to school and all that?
Oh my gosh. So originally I'm from a state called Iowa. In the middle of the United States. I say where you put your hand to hold up the map. Iowa's right under it. Moved to Seattle when I was 8, and then left Seattle to go to school in upstate New York. And then my first job out of school was actually programming COBOL.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I hate to say it or admit it, but I had this dual degree in finance and technology, and entry-level tech back in that day was way better than finance. So I was fortunate to be in this program where I got to do a different technology and a different business every year with a large insurance company. Mm-hmm. Actually was able to go to a startup in that company. And it was a small team. We were international. We were consolidating all these business units. And that's where I got my first taste of intrapreneurship, meaning the experience of building something from nothing in a large organization. And then that took me to Europe, where I actually met my boyfriend at the time, who was on his way to Germany, and decided I could still do my job from there, and ended up moving to Germany probably 10 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. So, and how long did you live in Europe?
Actually, that's wrong. I've been there 15 years. So I lived in Europe for 8 years total, 2 of those in England and the rest in Germany.
Wow. Let's just hold right there and describe the experience of living and working in Europe versus the U.S. and our cultural difference and even how we view working and all that. What was your experience there?
Absolutely. And I had the benefit of working in the UK and London as well as in Germany, which even those are very different. We have a common language in the UK, English, but actually I feel at times culturally we're more different than maybe even German and U.S. culture in terms of direct speaking and how you get things done in terms of work.
Right.
But Germany, for example, has 6 weeks of vacation for every worker in the country.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know what to say from
right. So it's everybody has the right to take a break, and so there's a lot of work-life balance. You come in, you work. There's not a lot of water cooler talk, and on the other side, when I worked in the UK, there was definitely more indirect nuances to how to get things done than the direct way, and what I experienced in Germany.
Right. So you were over there. I did a little research, of course. So you had another child. Was it your third child?
No, first.
First child.
First child.
Okay, sorry, first child. And what did you experience through that? Let's go there first, and then I think that will lead to what we'll talk about next.
Absolutely. So here I am working for a large technology company. I left that insurance company after we actually ended up selling that startup to another company, and then in that experience where I got to use both my finance skills and my technology skills, I thought it was a wonderful match. I was very dedicated to my career. I was bought in hook, line, and sinker to you can have it all. And what happened was in Germany, it felt like I could, right? Mm-hmm. So I found out after I got married, we got pregnant, and I was telling my boss, I'm pregnant, what are my options? We got to figure some things out. And his first thing was, congratulations, that's wonderful. In Germany, I was entitled to a year of government stipend leave, so I could take a year off paid.
Wow.
Yeah, and 3 years of my job protected. So I could have left my job for 3 years and come back and had the same level. And so I thought that was normal. My friends were doing it, all whether they were moms or dads, because dads also can take leave in Germany.
Right.
And it was not this choice of career or family, and I thought that was normal. I'd lived there so long, 8 years, and so I got to transition into motherhood. There was a deep part of me that said, I'm American, I'm not going to take the full year, I'm too dedicated to my work. You know, that sounds so funny in retrospect, but I'll be back in 6 months. And I thought that was going to be enough, and then at 6 months I was like, no way, this is impossible. I get it, why it's a year.
Yeah. And so you're still over there. When did you come back to the U.S.? Or walk me through that.
Absolutely. So actually, while on maternity leave, I was promoted. And then, I know, right?
You're going to have a new job.
Exactly. And we'd like you to do a worldwide role back here in Seattle. Okay. So the company moved me and my family back. And I started that role. My husband stayed at home for that next year of my son's life. And that was amazing in terms of our family relationship and dynamic, and like really living that caregiver is not just a woman's role. He was the primary caregiver. And in those times, he was kind of the only guy on the playground. It was really at the very beginning of when that was okay. And now I go to the playground, I see almost 50-50 here in Seattle. But it's when we started discussing what our options were if we were going to have another child that things really got interesting. And so I was so used to having ability to talk to friends about it in Germany, because it was a federal policy. Everybody in Germany had this right. And here it was so company specific, whether you could take leave for the birth of a child or if you were sick or something. And so I'd ask friends and colleagues, what are my options if I'm going to have another child? And I was told to keep it hidden as long as possible.
What do you mean by that?
Exactly.
Let's restate that.
Right. Keep what hidden, right? The baby. Like, if you get pregnant, the thing you got to worry about.
You see nothing here. There's nothing going on.
And that just struck me as a huge wave of emotion and uncertainty and insecurity, saying, what is this? Why do I need to hide this very amazing life event? What does that mean? So then I started realizing, I'm going to be perceived as less dedicated. I was also followed on because performance reviews are coming up. Mm-hmm. And so this cultural myth was so strong, like I had to feel quiet and ashamed almost that I was making a choice that is somehow in our culture seemed as selfish, because it's a personal choice, where in a lot of European countries, having a child is a societal contribution. Because you're continuing raising productive people who will become your future workers, your future consumers. There's a very strong mentality there. I don't know if we've got there yet in this country. And so I had what I call the perfect A/B test. Same company, same life event, just different country.
That is amazing. Same company, same thing, different country, different experience.
Right.
Okay, so with that being said, where did the transition come from to launch your own company to solve this problem? Walk us through that.
So I had that A/B test to sit and analyze. Of course I felt the emotion, but I was able to be rational and say, I don't believe this. I do not believe that my employer wants me to feel this way. They'd invested in me 7 years. I'd been there. I was on the track. This is not, I think, the message coming down from the top, if you will. Mm-hmm. What is this? And then I started digging deeper and deeper and realized it's lack of transparency, it's lack of information, it's a lack of access to information. Similar to other transparency movements. So if you think about travel agents and booking reservations, that was lack of transparency on pricing and options.
Right.
And what got disrupted there, right? Online travel booking, the Expedia Travelocities of the world. Same with real estate. The broker had the information on listings, on pricing, on history. And then we saw a transparency movement there with the Zillows and the Redfins and more. I think this is my effort to bring transparency to life events, because it's a highly complex, super regulated from a compliance perspective, complicated from an insurance product perspective, and nobody has transparency. It is an absolute black hole at employers and for employees. And so I said, I want to solve this with a platform.
Right. So walk us through that first. Clearly, you identified the problem. You saw that you could solve it, or at least really help. Walk us through that first phase of, okay, I'm going to start this. How did you go about starting your company? What were the first steps? And clearly, what you just said was, it's complicated. This is a complicated thing. How did you attack that when it was so complicated?
I had the wrong solution to the problem a couple times at first. So at first I thought maybe it's just a financial decision. The lack of transparency on can I afford taking leave or not. And so I said, let me write a book. I'm going to write a book on how to have European leave in the US. And I set out because financially I was taxed in Germany at a 40% effective income tax. So every euro I made, 40% went to the German government. And I came back to the US and I looked at my paycheck and 15% was going to the US government. We don't have income tax here in Washington, right? Yeah. And when you look at that and say, oh my God, the whole country's on sale. What if I tax myself? And so that differential between 40%, 15%, I save that money, I could take a year off.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Actually, and have more money than I had in Germany. So I said, that's it. That's the secret, is that our quote unquote freedom in this country is not to pay taxes. So when I started setting out to kind of write that book, How to Have European Maternity Leave in the US, kind of a financial planning reverse model,
right.
I said, wait a second, I think there's a service here. This is not a book. Nobody wants to read a book, especially when you're going to have a baby. No one wants to read that part. That's boring. So then I started exploring a B2C option and said, what if this is like wedding planning, or where you get your budget and then all the tasks you need to do to have a wedding, like The Knot back in the day and other websites. And so I built that. I went out, taught myself WordPress. I did a total scrappy, hamster behind the wheel thing, whereas you entered all this stuff in an online form, and then 24 hours later, we will provide you your customized leave report, which was me.
The wizard in the back.
Doing Excel and printing these PDFs.
Here, do this.
And sending, just to get early discovery and say, is this working? Is this what happened? We got about 100 users. We got some good press and things. And but I started asking the users, what is it that you'd like us to see further? Well, it's nice to know I can afford it to take the leave, but really, I'm not going to quit my job. So, and I don't understand what my employer policies are. I don't even know how to tell HR. I don't know how to tell my manager. I don't even know what my options are, and I just went, oh my goodness.
This is a bigger thing than...
This might be B2B, and it really solidified for me when I went to the White House Summit on Working Families. So President Obama convened a group of thought leaders across the country to talk about paid leave solutions, from not only the private sector with companies doing innovative things, the public sector advocacy, and it was great. I got to listen in on the problem from all different angles. And that's when I said, I was asked multiple times, I was representing this B2C concept of education for employees about their options. And, well, are you going to offer this to employers? Are you going to offer this to employers? And I said, I called the developers and I said, stop. It's, I think, a B2B.
Yeah.
But that's scary. Pivoting is scary.
It is, yeah. Well, let's back up a second. I really, really like the way that you put out an early product. You got feedback. You really listened to your early adopters, and you asked them, what else do you need, or what do you want from this? And I find a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of startup teams don't really do that. The mistake they make is in the dorm room or in the little room or the co-working space, that they are closed walls, and they creatively think about this idea and they think they're genius, and then they build it possibly for 6 months or a year. Then they roll it out and no one uses it.
That was me. And I threw down my own money.
Yeah.
Early, but not a lot.
Right.
And I didn't do anything like that, but I got the feedback.
You got the feedback, and so, you learned at some point, this actually is what's required, is put something out, get feedback, iterate, revamp, put it out, get feedback, iterate. Clearly you made a more significant pivot. I consider that, you call it a pivot, I consider that at some point discovering the business model.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm kind of going through the same thing in the sense that, you got to put it's putting it out there and realizing like there's this option, this option, this option, this option, this option, and at some point the one option of the main business model is going to present itself. So you did that. So at that point, okay, we're a B2B model. Specifically, what did that look like, and what was really that insight of we're going to take this to companies and really get them in terms of the paid the leave and the like, what did that all look like?
Right. And so you're absolutely right. Like I could have just said, no, it's going to be B2C forever, right? I could have not listened to them. So I did listen. And what I heard was, this is a challenge at my place of employment. And so then I said, I'm not in this industry. If anything, this is an industry I know nothing about. I'm not just going to go build something and hope someone buys it. I want gating factors that give me leading indicators that I should keep going. And one of those was, could I convince the top industry professional that I was onto something? And so I found that person, as well as did extensive competitive analysis and said, okay, who are the players? If I were to compete here, how would I be perceived tangentially to their offerings? And so once I did that work and I actually got a hold of that person, they took my call.
How did you reach out to them?
LinkedIn.
Nice.
A compelling, cold LinkedIn. And I think I got lucky because they were transitioning through companies.
Yeah.
And in those 30 minutes, I just said, here's the problem, here's the pain, here's how I think I could solve it, here's why I reached out to you. Am I crazy? Was the question for wanting to do something like this. And she said, no, absolutely not. I think you're onto something. And I took that and I said, great, can I keep you up to date with our progress? We'll see how far we get. And so that person eventually turned into an amazing champion and advocate for us and opened up many doors. And it was something that, I was so grateful for, to have the ability to nurture that. But I don't know if I answered your original question about what is it or...
Yeah, let's go into that actually. Yeah.
So what we learned was the industry had addressed the HR's problem of compliance, of how do I give the employee everything I'm supposed to do as an employer, my obligation solely as an employer. But what was missing was helping the employee understand how to navigate, similar to what we call the retirement planning tools like that Fidelity has or others around your road to retirement. Those are decision support tools that sit atop a transactional 401k benefit. The industry had only the transactional benefit of leave. There was no decision support on top of leave. And so it was a recreation of the wheel every time. Yeah. The hardest part for me in this, building the product, was trying not to bring my own bias, right? Thinking that I'd experienced it, so therefore there's one way to build it.
So why though, in the sense that you were female, a mother, you're, you were pregnant, you experienced the problem. You were like user one. Walk me through the thought process of why you wanted to remove your bias when, as a founder, you've identified a problem that you actually are having a major issue around. Why don't you solve that?
That pain got me up every day to keep doing things when everybody was telling me no, but I knew it wasn't going to be something that was marketable at an enterprise level, at a B2B level, and so went deep on customer discovery right after having that initial gating call and said, okay, let's see if we can create some concepts out of this. Don't build the product, but let's see if we can create concepts out of these interviews. And we did 40 interviews. I had a fantastic partner who was a UX UI background person who said, and who didn't have children, who didn't want to have children, who couldn't even understand what these issues were, and that is the best person to bring in to counter my bias.
Very much, yeah. Interesting. So I smartly surrounding yourself with people that aren't similar thinking. I mean, it's not just like, people that are like, oh, you're right. It's, bringing some different viewpoints makes a holistic team. I thought that's really interesting. So let's get into, your experience and, So you pitched Founders Live in 2015. You then raised at some point, right?
2016.
January. Seed? Was that seed?
Seed.
Okay. And was that local, or how did that all come?
It was a mix. So what we did is took the results of that customer interview process, user interview process, and I just built some concept slides. And then I went to companies and I said, we have an early adopter program. Are you interested? Here's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And here's the terms. You can come in with preferential pricing. We're only taking 5 companies. And you need to sign up by May 30th. And
So exclusive, time limit, and you got them.
right.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't get those companies signed up, the market wasn't ready. That
Yeah.
was my deal with me.
Yes.
And so that was enough motivation to say, okay, this is all going to go away if you can't get a company to sign up or 2 companies to sign up. And so I was testing the sales motion, right? And I was learning, is there a market readiness here? And I had one company that was almost ready to sign, and then another company called 3 p.m. on like May 30th and said, we know today's the last day to get into the program. Can we still get in? And I was like, well, we have 1 spot left. We can take it. It was amazing. It was a great marquee customer.
Yeah.
And with that, we were able then to go build product. I bootstrapped. And then we had enough customer traction, initial indicators of traction, and product then that when we raised the round, it wasn't an idea. It was already something that people were interested in and buying.
Yeah. And so your experience right there was, this is perfect. I love this journey, your startup journey, because you not only like early on tested and got the early feedback, you surrounded yourself with people that weren't exactly the same as you. You then went out and pre-sold and had early customers paid. So they paid. You use that as a bootstrap to then build the product and build that early stage. You then raised based on your traction and real life. Companies are using it. We have traction. We're growing. I mean, this is literally that. If you could paint a picture, that's it. Okay. And so we'll then transition into how did you handle when there was interest to have an acquisition? That's fairly early in the process.
Super early.
So what was your thought when it was like they approached you, the conversation started? How did that all come about?
So you're constantly fundraising even after a seed. We were able to make our initial raise last 18 months. So we're almost getting to that end of the 18 months and we have to make a decision. Did we reach Series A level metrics, or do we need to take a seed 2?
Yeah.
And you don't want to do seed 2. It's not always fun, but sometimes you have to, and it's part of life. So we were at that inflection point, and then I think one thing I would recommend to everybody is when you're at these inflection points of plan A, plan B, plan C, is not to navel gaze. Not just to look inward and say, if we could just do a little bit more on the product, everything would be solved. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And I think there's this model called Porter's 5 Forces. And that really talks about what are the macroeconomic, industry-specific, large forces impacting your business model that you don't control.
Right.
And look at their weight in your decision making around plan A, plan B, plan C. And we had a very clear map of what was happening. So we had legislative movements happening. We had states passing paid leave laws, creating more demand. We had companies saying, we're going to offer paid family leave as a brand new benefit to attract and retain employees. So lots of press, lots of national conversation, which creates interest in market maturity.
Yeah.
And then we had these incumbents watching us, talking to us, looking at us, and then it's like, okay, this is the recipe for build versus buy. And if you can figure out when that point is or try to predict it, and then back into your fundraising strategy around it, I think that increases your likelihood of success. Because the alternative that I've seen is if you just go down this internal sort of inward strategy of your own product and say, okay, we're here. Next thing to do is raise a Series A. I don't necessarily think that is always the best next step.
Very much so. I fully agree. And most teams are they're way too inwardly focused, and maybe that's part of this is the path we determined this path 5 years ago and we're going to stick to it, or even 2 years ago, we were going to raise here. But having that macro, as you say, or at least external viewpoint of understanding the factors and influences that are actually happening outside of your control that will influence, right? There are other companies that are like, we are in the process of, this is a main focus now. Maybe we'll go here and partner and, acquire. And so, so it sounds like when that timing happened, you evaluated it and made that decision. And so, I guess my question would be, your thought process there was, is it more like, this will help us fully achieve the vision that we have set forth with this company, partnered in within, versus like going at it on our own and trying to raise more money, or at least like try to get a ton more customers? Is that what you were thinking, or like describe your thought process there?
Yeah, and so I made the decision, meant I worked with my investors to bring them along. I wanted to be able to explain this logic and thought process and convince them, because going to market in an acquisition play can be perceived as weak. And I wanted to get everybody on board that this is an offensive move.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that. Don't tell investors, bring them along. Same with your team. This needs to be something that everyone's aligned to the point where we even had equity structures that incentivized acquisition, just to keep it on the table. We knew that if we were going to get big enough, it would cost us $1 to scale sales and marketing, where an incumbent with an existing install base, customers, 65 cents to do the same motion.
Right.
And so just looking at that pure financial conversation, it's not a good use of capital. And if we could find the right terms and funding mechanisms, we could achieve our mission, which was to make leave normal in the workplace and have technology be the center of that today, with a partner who has that aligned vision and existing book of business. And we were very fortunate to find that.
And so this was, who was it?
A Unum Group.
A Unum Group.
Yep.
And walk us through those conversations have to be, you're clearly laying out all that, and so there's either massive alignment or there's misalignment. Going through those conversations with the executives and are you the one that's laying out, here's what we essentially, our terms and our desire, and here's what we're looking for with a partner? Is that your team, or was that them saying, here's what we're looking for? Are you, or is it both?
It's both. It's such an interesting process. I would recommend don't do it alone. The best decision I think we ever made was to get a representation through an investment banker here locally that had our vertical, and don't just go with the first one. We interviewed 3. Talk about fee structures, talk about success metrics,
right,
and then value their alignment with your outcome. And you'll quickly find somebody who's matched and not matched. That's very apparent. And so we were lucky. We found somebody who was matched and reputable, came, with recommendations, and they guided us through the whole process. And there's so many great analogies when you run an acquisition process that are similar to buying and selling a home, right? So they help you get your house ready to show. They create the flyers and the brochures to get people to come to the open house, and so that's essentially that process. And you don't want to do that without a realtor at times and someone who knows the market, benchmarks, comparables. Yeah. And so, I knew I wanted this to be more beneficial for our team than raising a Series A and exiting 5 to 7 years from then. And so there was a time element, there was a exit amount, and there was a value amount of, is this what we set out to do as our team? And we kind of knew what that was and said, if it was anything that was substantially different from that, then we're going forward. We're going to keep pouring gas and spending $1 for sales and marketing, right? Yeah. But if we found these other boxes that we could check, then let's have a conversation.
Yeah. As we talked a short while ago, I think it really was the best decision. And the way I view it similar is, there are these like mini, I view it as a bell curve, and there's a number of bell curves in the possible life of a company. And, if it feels like you kind of hit that top of that first bell curve, and it's like maximum value at this point in time. And if you don't make that decision, then it kind of comes down, and that's like, okay, now it's extended, right? But then if you raise more money, the economics are now different from the cap table, shareholders, time frame. And I think the big thing is time frame. And you have now had a successful exit in this company. You obviously have a future with that company, but at the same time, you've got everything else in front of you. And there's founders that have been working at their company for 10 years. That's 10 years, right? And the economics are different. And I think it just is like, when you exit on that top of the bell curve there, so much is now in front of you. And which kind of leads me to the next question is, do you imagine looking out, what's next in the next 3 to 5, 10 years? Like, are you I don't like the term, but are you a serial entrepreneur or someone that will want to do this again? Or do you feel like this specific problem in the world is something you want to continue to pursue for a long time? And maybe those are coincided.
Oh gosh, I'm so passionate about this problem, and still love what we're doing. We're doing it on such a great scale right now. It's so fun, and I'm not a serial fundraiser, right? I think that's some of this innovation model that we have to look at and go, is this really the best outcome for founders here, in terms of serial fundraising? It's very hard, and I'm a mom of 2, and I have a husband that has to also deal with this, and those are very real things in these contracts that we make with our families when we found companies. And I don't want to diminish that importance too of calculation and say, do I keep doing this? Because it is a lot, or are there other ways to do it? And so I think what we did was another way to do it. So, from incorporation to exit was 18 months.
That's so quick. That's amazing.
It feels longer.
Of course.
But when I sit here and say that, it's mind-blowing to me that, but it was allowing the market to dance and have that market timing, and never just keep going down my train of product.
Yeah. No, going back to what we talked about before, I feel like you were just a very hyper-aware CEO and founder, and aware of the market, the movement, the timing, and that is, I feel like, so important, to not be so hyper-focused and tunnel vision. And of course, strong vision and stubbornness is important as a founder. Like, there's no way around it, because it is a difficult thing. But equally is the ability to kind of raise up, have your antennas very finely tuned to the market, everything around the world, the political nature, everything, and to make these decisions when you should, or when they make sense. And I think that's it. So what you didn't really answer though is you are really passionate about this area of the world and industry, like this focus. Do you see yourself continually looking at solutions in
I can't help myself. I mean, it's just, it's just, you see it everywhere. And you quickly do the little sizing, is that a TAM or a SAM or, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I do know I'm passionate about the impacts of mental health. And I think that similarly in the workplace, we need to make mental health normal, and leave around that. And again, I think technology has a huge role to play there. And so, our solution isn't just for maternity and paternity leave. It sort of started that way, but now it is much broader. And a lot of what we see in our current society here in the U.S. is a result of lack of transparency to the existing resources.
Yeah.
And it's another transparency movement.
So I just had a conversation the other day with an individual here in Seattle who's looking this issue really carefully as well, the mental health. And my first comment was, I think the biggest detriment to it is the two words mental health actually are negative in people's minds. And I think that that's a problem, because there needs to be resources and help in this area. Everyone has struggles here. Everyone. Yes. I'm looking at the camera. Yeah. Everyone. And the stigma around it needs to be removed. I think we're starting to see some things, that at least some layers being removed, and of course that the very, well-known people that have made decisions, and I think we're just at a point where it's now time. But how do we work through that stigma? And my goal with Founders Live, part of it is to create a community where people can talk about this. It's okay, and bring solutions. What do you think? What needs to change?
I mean, stigma, right? Like, that is what I was facing in the workplace. It was stigma around having a child and being a dedicated worker. And, how do you normalize these human elements, like the human journey in what we've created is sort of this sterile world, and it doesn't exist. I mean, and so how do we allow for a little more fluidity there? And one of the ways I think is taking the foundation and making what is available today more accessible, right? Bringing that transparency. Yeah. Just what we did with our platform or product was combine all that complexity, because, oh my gosh, if you've ever applied for Section 8 housing, if you've ever applied for food stamps, if you've ever applied for Medicaid, oh my gosh, you have to have a pseudo degree in social work to be able to even understand the terminology.
Wow.
And how is it when you're at your most vulnerable and least supported in any kind of life crisis, are you expected to engage with those services? And so that's why I think you see minimum basic income starting to come to fruition and things like that. The amount of administrative friction we put on that doesn't drive the outcomes we want. What if we free up those dollars into a minimum basic income? Yeah. And so I don't know. I don't know the answer yet. I just know. And what I do know is that from a technology and innovation perspective, we have solved a lot of the low-hanging fruit, like sharing pictures online and talking to each other and doing all these social things. That's the low-hanging fruit when it comes to technology. I think there's a lot of big, difficult problems left in society that technology can play a role in, but they're at this convergence of government policy and solutions. And so we as individuals and entrepreneurs have to get better at influencing and advocating for those changes on the legal side, just like with paid leave, and speaking both sides and bringing those two together.
You're so absolutely right with like the low-hanging fruit. I could use other words for it, but it's it is, and that's great. Look, we can message anyone in the world, we can share photos, we can index tag things. That's awesome. But what it really sounds like you're doing is you look at very complex emotional social problems in the world. That's what you're doing. And if you're going into any sort of direction in the emotional mental health and in the workplace and in our society, I support you, and I give you the most just go do it, because I think we need it. And just as we have all these other solutions, or at least resources for other things in our world now, leave is a big one that clearly that's not even majorly solved yet. So there's a lot going on there. But if you're going to go that direction, I think it's so drastically needed. And if in 20 years we can look back and have the stigma removed, what I told this person was, is there another term that can be used that might.
Such a great point.
Yeah.
Because I say this all the time. It's so funny. I smiled when you said that around mental health. So I tell people the worst thing we have going for paid family leave is the word family. Right. And that using that word family is softening the business economics that are at stake, because they're huge. Employers can save millions of dollars if they get the right paid family leave policy. We can save millions of dollars if we get the right solutions to scale these programs at a state level, at an employer level. But just because we call it family, you know, it's not so important. It's soft, right?
Yeah.
It's not hardcore engineering. And
Yeah.
that, to me, was my advantage. Because leave impacts predominantly women and children, this is one of the reasons why I'm like, why me? Why did I come up with this? Maybe because those who have the skills or to create a product like this maybe did not experience it. And that's leading to the bias we see in fundraising, and that sort of likes whatever it is, that term of perpetuating it. So that's another thing we have to fix is it's okay if I don't understand it as an investor, but there's got to be better metrics to deem an investment worthy or not. And I hope by exiting with, you know, a positive that we can say, look, it was family, but it was a great business as well.
Exactly. Well, we could stay here and talk all day, but we got more things to do. So
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was amazing, and I look forward to talking with you next time with most likely your next company.
Oh, man. Yeah, we'll see. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
Yes.
I really
All right.
appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too.